Okay, here we are. I haven't done this for a while, so you all have to give me a little bit of wiggle room on whether I'm going to do a good job or not. Been very busy doing some other things, and I haven't had much time in my week to get around to doing something on the YouTubes. But now I am going to do something, and we're going to talk about blast-induced vibration, because I've had a few messages late at night on LinkedIn from a few people just asking, oh, what would my advice be in a certain situation? So I am going to sort of try and lay out how I think about it and what systems I use. And they're pretty basic systems, because I find vibration such a complex idea. People can make it much more harder to achieve than what it can actually be. And there's some ideas there that work well if you have the information, and if you don't have good information, then those ideas don't work well. So let's go to the video. Let's go to the screen. Yeah. And I'm hoping that my mic is working and everything. Maybe someone can tell me if it is. Rightio. Okay, well, going to keep going with this. And so first of all, I have set up here a little bit of a breakdown of the AS2187 scale distance formula. It seems to be a fairly well standard formula in blasting, and is used in other places as well, but it might be done with feet and pounds sort of thing instead of kilos and meters. But here we are using meters, and it pretty much takes several inputs, and those are ppv, k, d, and w, which is weight, distance, site constant. Site constant, now that might change for each site that you have, so each sensitive site may have a different constant, and it may have a different attenuation rate. So it's definitely going to be a different distance away. But anyway, so I've got this little sheet here. I'd like to run through another sheet here where we talk about the difference between a log graph and a exponential, just a standard linear graph, which then, because the formula has an exponential component to it, it looks like a curve. And then we move on to try to show you a bit of what a different blast hole impact has if everything else stays the same. Talk a bit about P wave velocity and when it reaches the site, and what you need to consider when thinking about using arrival times on a blast, because a lot of people think arrival times are the be end and end all because a program can do it, but a lot of the times it's not available. 2 seconds while I adjust my microphone. All right, I noticed that my sound has been a little bit quiet, and now it's really loud. Okay, so really loud. Right, okay, we're turning that down a touch. There you go, that's much better. So I am moving on from that. We're going to be looking at, also try to show a bit of superpositioning and how that works. So these aren't these aren't actual traces or anything, but it's going to be, a little bit of a gauge into the concept of superpositioning and how that impacts you and what superpositioning actually does. We'll look at the AS2187.2 Appendix J ground vibration air blast, but I'm just going to be talking about ground vibration. And the reason why we want to look at this chart is just to see what we can and can't impact, or what we have a lot of information over, and a little bit of control advice at the end here, and a little bit of just a bit of a blurb there, which I think it's important to read out, and it pretty much says there that accurate estimation of ground vibration and air blast is complex, and it is like I've said. And so the blasting is highly nonlinear, which pretty much means that you can do a lot of different things with it. It's one condition might exponentially affect another condition, and a lot of it has to do with rock types. It's also pretty much this standard, this appendix of this standard is the best thing to reference, the best thing to start. Just ignore what other people say. Go and read the standard for yourself. Even ignore what I've said in this video, and which seems a bit pointless to say, but ignore what I've said and just read the standard and get your head around the standard, and because the standard and this appendix has stacks of information in. Even if you're not in Australia and you're from another country, you can get a lot of information out of the Australian standard on AS 2187, which is the explosives use standard for Australia. And a few things on how we can control it, but the table pretty much. So let's go to the table first of all, because one thing that we often do in the world of blasting is we come up with great ideas, and then we realize that we can't do anything about fixing that idea or changing that in the blast, because it's outside of our control. Certainly if you're in a gold mine, you can't change it to iron ore, can you? Because it's gold. You're mining gold. So there's something that is out of your control, and a lot of the times geology is a primary out of control issue, but it has heaps of impact, very significant impact to vibration. So down the bottom here, just dial that up 1, 2, maybe? No, back 1. There you go. Right, and we can see here there's some not within the control of our blasting operators so you and me, we can't really control these aspects. And one of them that has insignificant contribution to ground vibration is the general surface that we're working on. So this standard doesn't think that has an impact on vibration. But the next level down, it says geological conditions, and it's talking about how that has a significant impact on vibration. And then we have wind and weather conditions. That's not so big a deal in ground vibration. Massive in air blast. Very, very big contributor in air blast. But you can't do much about it except not blast on a windy, weather conditions. But what happens after wind and weather? Generally, after rain, the ground's saturated, and then you have water saturated ground, and water saturated ground has a massive impact on blast vibrations. So we cannot do much about it except not blast. So if we're in the wrong geology, we can't do much about it except maybe don't mine that geology. The second one is water saturated ground. So if we can't do anything about wet ground, we need to live with it and use other things that we can control. But if you can wait till the ground dries out for some reason, like say you're in the Pilbara, where we've got a bit of experience in the Pilbara, if you were just to wait 2 days, the water after a rain event, the water in the ground would almost be back to normal, and your vibration or your K values will be much lower. But going back up the top here, we've got this other one, which is maximum instantaneous charge. So this has a significant impact. So that is the amount of charge per hole, per round, or per influencing round, should we say. So if your holes influence each other at 8 milliseconds, then maybe you should look at an 8 millisecond model. If you're only looking at a dominant hole or a single hole model, then by single hole I mean one contributing hole to the MIC. So that is that the other holes don't know anything about each other. So one will fire, and then and that is like a single isolated event in the mind of the model, in the mind of the vibration model. So that's what I mean by MIC. So it's what contributes to the period of vibration. What are the contributing holes? So in this one here, generally speaking, I look at, as a starting point, I look at the holes that are fired within 8 milliseconds. Now, that's an old shock tube sort of non-L sort of concept, but I think it's a really important concept. And later on, as you progress and you find your feet in vibration control, you can see that it might change from 8 to you might only need to look at 6 milliseconds, or you might go to electronic timing and you will have a true single hole fire, and so you only look at the maximum hole influencing. Also, you have delay interval, which is the rate at which you're firing these rounds off. So that contributes to MIC anyway, so that would stand to reason that's significant. Then we have direction of initiation. So how are we angling the blast? Are we having the blast work towards the sensitive side? If it's working towards the sensitive side, it's amplifying the energy. Each successive detonation is amplifying that energy, and it's working back. It's bashing the sensor. So the best thing to do there is obviously start closest to the sensor with the least amount. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink. Sorry, dry throat. All right, moving on, and then we've got charge confinement. So how much of that charge are we keeping in the ground at any time? And then we've got sort of like blast hole deviation, stuff like that. So are the blast holes together or apart, because that'll change how much they influence. Not a problem. Pretty simple things, but this chart's amazing. This is a good reference. What can you control? What can't you control? So a lot of people then talk about like arrival times and superpositioning and those sorts of things. So if we talk about superpositioning of waves, and this is what happens with these are not blast waves either. These are just simple waves. So I've got an amplitude, an initial amplitude. I've got an oscillation. I've got a phase offset, which is do they line up or are they out of phase? So, and we've got sort of like signal 1, signal 2, signal 3, and then the sum. So the sum is the red one that shows you the wave. So let's look at something that's simple. Let's put them all at the same point. Point 5. And let's put them all at the same oscillation of, 4. And we can see here, and we're not going to put them in, we're going to put them all in phase. So they're going to be in phase. That means all the waves are starting at the same time. So we'll put them all at 1. Okay, so why can you only see the green one? Because that's the last one that's mapped. So you can see here that the waves are in line. Now, the red wave is 3 times higher or larger than the green waves, or the green waves and the blue waves and the pink waves. So you've got a superpositioning, and that means that you're adding the energy to it. So if all your rounds were to fire at the same time, and your monitoring point was to see this at the same time, each one of these holes was to arrive at the monitor point at the same time, and now perfect waves like this, then you would see you would see an amplification. So if you had 3 holes that arrived at the monitor at the same time. So if we were to say, well, our first one is 0.3 and our second one's 0.5, and we'll just go with our third one at 0.7. So we've got 3 different waves. They're all in phase and they now add up to each other. So the 0.5, the 0.3, the 0.7, they all add up and they create that 1.5 amplification. And then so we look at the oscillation of those and we say, well, how many bends are we having in a phase or in one complete iteration sort of thing or time frame. And so let's I'm trying to explain it as simple as I can. So we'll go 5. We can see here that we've got a slightly different wave. It's actually shorter now. The wave is shorter, and that would indicate a shorter, more frequency. There's a higher frequency there, and so we've got 4, and then we'll go 3 here. Right. So now we can see that our resultant wave is a little bit wibbly wobbly. Now the idea here is if these waves were exact, like let's say we had the first 2 waves. Let's go with signal 1 and signal 2. They're going to be the same oscillation, and we want them. Ideally, this is what superpositioning does. So we want them to be. We want to reduce the vibration reading that we get, or we want to reduce the magnitude of that wave. So the best idea we could have with waves that are oscillating at the same time is to put them out of phase. So let's say we put them out of phase completely. 1.5, let me just check that. Sorry, we're at 5 and, well, we want it, maybe 2 it is. Well, I'll get it right sooner or later. We want this to be completely out of phase, so we'll start it there or something like that. Maybe I'll get it right. Jeepers. Anyway, I'm gonna hope that I've got it out of phase. Let's put the amplification of the third signal at 0, let's say, just so that we don't get anything there. So we've only got 2 waves now to look at, and we've got 1 wave, and we'll do this with 4 actually. Let's do it with 4 so we can actually get it right. And I'll go 2 there. So essentially we've got this pink wave which is starting off here, and that's all that we see. And then we want to start the blue wave at 1.8. There you go. That's why I haven't been able to get at 1.8. Let's start it at 1.8. Right, so now we're kind of out of phase, right? And you can see that even though this blue wave is much bigger, this is much smaller because we're only getting the residual between those two. And so let's put these at the same size, just so that we can see what we're talking about when we got it. Now, this is a completely out of phase, well, almost completely out of phase. Maybe it's 1.85 or something like that, right? Or maybe not. 1.75. I think I was pretty close the first time. 1.8, right? So what we've got is we've got a signal, and then we've got nothing, because these waves, the wave that's going up is cancelling out the wave that's coming down. Now, this is called superpositioning. Now, when you do like Monte Carlos and when you do all this fruity stuff that some people will try to get you to do, it's not without value in understanding, but it is without value in accurately predicting. Personally, I believe. So that's my personal belief that the more complex the model, the more errors you're going to incur, and the less predictable that model will be in the long run. In the short term, 1 or 2 blasts, maybe you'll get it right, but in the long run, eventually you add too many issues for it to be predictable. This is the same with every model that anyone talks about on any subject. The more complex the model, the more prone it is to error for future predicting. This one I wanted to show you just because this is what happens when the waves meet each other and cancel each other out. You get nothing. You get no signal. So if you were to maybe get your blasting right every time, and you were to get these things exactly the right place all the time, and the ground was uniformed forever, then you would see that you would be getting these waves, these cancelled out waves. But if you don't get it in phase, or you add another blast, or add another phase, or add another shape, or something like that, and they're not out of phase, then you get a wave that looks like this, right? So these are all at the same amplitude. So they're the same strength initially, and what you get is this massive peak, because sooner or later they line up and they join up and you get these wobbly shapes. That is what happens in the waveform with superpositioning. So please, if anyone has any other ideas or concepts about it and they can tell me that I'm wrong, that's great. But this is, you can see this red line gets all wobbly. It's starting to look like a blast trace. Now, if we were to add more and more and more and more of these events, we would end up with something that looks like a blast event. What we're not dealing with is attenuation of the signal in this particular example. Right. So going on to something else that people talk about now, these are really high level sort of, like these are people study these things forever, and I haven't studied it forever. I've only just done it for blasting, right? The other one to think about is P waves. Now, everyone, or arrival times of blasting. So a lot of people, shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people think that when they're blasting, they're going to look at the arrival times of a hole's signal. Now, if they don't know their geology, if they're not full bottle on their geology, they will get this wrong every time, because geology is going to be driving your P wave. And what can you not control according to the AS 2187? Geological conditions. So you cannot control your geological conditions. So you can't control whether that rock is solid, uniformed, igneous granite, or it's sedimentary, iron ore, folded. You can't tell, you can't control whether it's iron or whether it's waste. So these things change, this geochemical construction, they change they alter the speed at which the wave travels through the ground, and that's what P wave velocity is. It's velocity of the primary wave. Here we have an example. I've got a little picture of a blast over here, and the blast is firing back that way, and it's emanating signals out in every direction. And we have 4 sensitive sites. One that's 400 meters away, one that's 800 meters away, another one that's 800 meters away in a different direction, and one that's 1,000 meters away. Now, the geology that goes back to this 1,000 meter one is 2,000 meters per second. So at 2,000 meters per second, it takes half a second for it to see the signal of the blast hole. And if you go to the next one, well, it takes half a second to see the signal of the blast hole, but it's closer. But the P wave's slower because the geology is different. And so we keep seeing this when the P wave changes, which means that when the geology changes, your P wave changes, and now your arrival times are totally wrong. So it's important to understand that concept. Do you need to know all this stuff, how to calculate it, all that sort of stuff? Do you need to know it? Maybe you do need to know it. Maybe you don't. I personally don't spend much time on it because it's such a complex scenario. The geology is constantly changing. At one particular site, there was a range between 600 and 1600 actually meters per second. And so that meant that I could have, like if I was to type that in, 1600 here, there, I've got this range here. And if I'm looking at a vibrational result, or when I get the vibration from a blast that's 800 meters away, I have a range between seeing that vibration 1.3 seconds after the blast is fired, or half a second after the blast is fired. So there's a massive range there, and it depends completely on your P wave velocity, and that depends on your geology. So can you control P waves? No. Should you think about them? Yes, you should think about them. Should you tie your model to them? Maybe not. Maybe not unless you're doing like a doctorate on it or something like that. That's my advice. So for those people that strongly feel, and this is one of those things that people feel strongly about, if you feel strongly about blast vibrations, then you may consider that I am wrong. And if that is your honest belief, and then good for you. I am just telling you that I wouldn't spend much time on it unless my blasting was perfect. If my blasting was perfect and this was the only thing I could look at, that's what I'd look at. If I couldn't, I'd look at other things, right? So I want to go to this table now, and we're going to look at what we've got. Now, the formulas, these formulas here that I've got here in these cells 19 to 24, these formulas you can go and grab. They are on my Blasting Apps website. The link's in the blurb about on this video. So if you expand the little advice blurb or the comment blurb there, you'll see at the bottom of the video, you'll see where to go to get these calculations, and then you can just plumb them in, and you too can have a spreadsheet like this. So the red ones are getting calculated, all the other colors are adding to the calculation. So let's say I know my site constant. Now one that's set in the AS2187 is 1140. That's a standard. They said start with a standard, and 1.6. Now the 0.05, this is the square. That shouldn't be negative either. That should be just, this is a square root. So any value to the power of 0.5 is square root. Rightio. Okay. So we have, this is a standard. So with this standard of 1140 and all these things at this distance, 280 with a MIC with an influencing charge of 140 kilos, I'm going to get expected 7.22 millimeters per second. Now, you can see that there's only been a 40 value of 40 changed in our site constant, and there's a significant change in vibration there. Now, this is important to understand. This is an exponential graph, so you won't see it here, but you will see, like, if I was to double this amount, or let's start with 100 kilos, and we can see we get 5.1. If I'm to double that or halve the distance, actually let's halve the distance, so we'll go 300 here. So we get 4.94. If I was to go not change anything else except to halve the distance to 150 meters, my PPV is exponentially larger. My particle velocity is exponentially larger, and you can see that there. It's 14.97. Now it was only 4 before, so it's like 4 times the amount. Rightio. And this is what we need to understand about vibration, is that the closer you get, there are far more controls that you have to do. So you can use this to calculate anything you like. So say you've got a reading of, you want to work out your K value. You've got a reading of 10. and everything else is the same, 280, 140, all that. Well, it's suggesting that your K value for that site, your site constant for that, is 1580. Now, after a while, you might see that your K is static, but your values still change on your PPV. So you might find that it's actually your attenuation value, which is the 1.6, that's actually changing. And we'll see that in the next graph. So here we have another graph. Wow, this is what the graph looks like linearly, which is just, you see this curve. And this is a log-log version of it. Now, a lot of people see this log-log version. I don't like looking at the stuff in log-log. I don't know why that is. I think it's better. There's a more context to this graph than there is to this graph. However, this angle is your attenuation. So here we have, let's say, two models. We have a baseline model. They both got the same K value, but one has at 300 meters gets 12.4 and one gets 12.76 at 300 meters. So fairly close. The values are fairly close. The K values are exactly the same, but the weights are massively different. And this is different because of the attenuation. So the signal is decaying faster on the red one. And that is changing that. Sorry, I got that wrong. The signal is attenuating differently on this red value, and we can see here that it's that we get the same 12.54 and 12.76 at 300. But the only thing that's different is this attenuation value. And as you change this value, you can either straighten out so as we get a much larger, because our weights are completely different. So if our attenuation, so when I was saying before, and I'll say it, as our attenuation is smaller in value, closer to 1, that means that we are getting less decay in the signal. And I apologize if you only watched up to the other part of the video. And the larger the number, the more decay in the signal. So this is you see a lot more decay. So it gets down to that smaller number quicker. So like at 1.2 here, or let's dial it down to 1, is almost no attenuation. But if we can see this change in this angle of this slope of that line, and that's your attenuation is changing that. So if we dial it up to both having 1.6, right, we can see a significant. So if it was the same K value and the same attenuation, then our controlling factor is weight. And so that just shifts the amplitude of that weight. So if we want to get that red one closer to the blue one on this graph, then we can just increase the weight. Yeah. It's pretty easy. So this is the relationship of this scale distance calculation. I like to go to the next graph. Good, we're at 33 minutes. Hopefully I've talked fast enough. But it's important to see these sorts of things. So you can have the same values, and it can be just a slight changes in these K and these attenuation, this site constant and this attenuation constant, or it can be massive changes in the weight or the distance. So if we look at the next graph, which is a comparison graph. Now this is a question that I was asked about what this would be good for using for advice. So let's say everything's the same, your site constant's 1,000, your exponent is negative 1.6, and you got a target limit of 50 millimeters, or let's change, well, it's 50 millimeters at the moment. So at the moment with these settings, we've got a calculated PPVs over here, and this is for line 1 and line 2. Now this is more about I built this just today to talk about hole diameters, because hole diameters are going to control what aspect, what geometry of that hole, what is going to control, what part of the vibration controls is hole diameter going to affect, and that is these two up here. Instantaneous charge, sorry, this single one here, instantaneous charge. So it's going to affect that, because the larger the diameter, the larger the explosive per meter, the larger mass of explosives per meter, and therefore the more explosives going off in any given period of time. Pretty, I hope this is fun. I think this is awesome. This is a crazy, crazy formula. I hope you can see all these. Right. So we've got this graph over here. We can see that if we are going to initiate, so we got like the first hole 102, 2 holes firing, 102 mil, and this is our curve at 102 mil. So if we know what distance we are away, then then let's do that. So let's say we've got, I know, a nearby town. They're about, let's say they're 1 kilometer away, right? We'll give them 1,000 meters to be away. They're 1,000 meters, right? I have 1,000 meters, and I'm in, let's say I'm in a igneous ore body, and the geology is pretty uniform, and the ground is kind of wet. Well, my K value in that instance is going to be quite high. So let's say I'm at a 4,000 K for my site constant, and I know this, right? And I'm just going to go with the standard of 1.6, and I've got a target limit of 50 millimeters. So let's say these people are antsy. These people, I shouldn't say that. These people are very concerned about their village. They've been living there all their lives. They've got generations of history there, and they're very concerned with damage of their village. They got lots of kids that play out in the street, all that sort of stuff. So maybe, maybe our target limit should be a bit lower, 10. So we're going to say our target limit is 10. Right. And we are thinking that we're going to get 8 holes firing at any given time. With our timing, we're always at 8, right? Our pattern size on this one, this doesn't really matter too much. It's just really powder factor at the moment that this looks at. So let's say with the 114, we might go up to, or let's say with the 102, we'd be down to 2.8 burden and 3.2, right? Something like that. Okay. So, and here we're at 3 by 3.5. So we got 2 different hole diameters. One's a 102 mil and one's a 114 mil hole, or 115. Call it what you like. What we can see here right away, well, it doesn't help with our explosive density. Let's put that at the right height. Let's say we're going to be using a 1.2 in average in hole. So this is average explosive density. I'm not going to calculate the pressure of that. So 1.2 on that as well. Pretty close there. We've got a charge mass of 337 kilos there because we're letting 8 holes off in our influencing round. And what we get out the end of that is at that distance that we said from there, we should be hitting around the 6 and the 7, and our limit's 10. So that's great, awesome, right? Awesome. Now this little chart here is showing you how close these waves are together, and how close these blasts. This is the log of it. Now they're both at the same angle, both at the same K. The only thing that's different in here is the influencing charge, and the influencing charge on line 2 is the hole driven by the hole diameter, and you can see here that this point is slightly higher on the chart. So at a 100 meter distance, we would be looking at quite a significantly larger amount of vibration, right, than this one, because this is a log graph, so it could be like quite a lot more. All right, so and we can see that. Well, let's just dial in 100. Oh, there you go. So these are our K value. These are our calculated PPVs at that point. We can see here that sorry about that. That our smaller diameter hole is 100 millimeters less in our PPV. Obviously, this is extreme because 100 meters away is essentially is the haul road away from that. So the further we get away, when we are close to a blast, we can see here, and that's why this is a good graph. When we are close to a sensitive structure, our meterage, as we decrease our distance from that structure, we are going to vastly increase the vibrational response of the structure. So that's essentially what this is good for looking at. So from 200 down to 100, we see a 200 millimeter per second increase. It's a tripling of that, or doubling of that value, tripling to doubling of that value. So it's good to know this. So if you can not do anything else but put the blast further away, that is the best thing. So if you can get the blast further away from whatever sensitive structure you're doing, or you can move that sensitive structure, move that village, relocate the people there if they are inclined to be relocated, then you can see that. So what can you do to control that when you're at that? So let's say our village is only 500 meters away. And we have a 10 million, oh, sorry, did I put in a meter there? 500, there you go. So we have a 10 millimeter limit, and we can see here that we're well over it, we doubled it, and this one hasn't helped either. So what can we do to control it? So let's put both these at the same amount, put them both at 102. I think we'll just make that the same as well. So everything's pretty much the same, right? Everything's the same. So the same value. You can see that in the graphs there lined up. What can we do? So we've got our baseline of 102 with a bench height of 6 meters, 800 mil, 800 sub drill. We've got a stemming length of 2.5. So we can do a couple of things. We can put in an inert deck, which means we're now going to be increasing the number of rounds, but we're going to be reducing the explosives by half. So if we're still going to stick with 8, this gets confusing, right? So let's say we put in a meter of inert material. Well, let's do that on the second one, actually. So we'll do that, change it on the second one. Put a meter of inert material in there. Straight away, we have dropped that. But what we haven't said, so we have to fire these decks together, and they are now going to be considered one hole. Two decks are considered one hole. But let's say we were to delay them, then that would be essentially like dropping it into 4 influencing charges, which would do it. So if we were to delay them significantly by more than 8 milliseconds, because we're going to work on an 8 millisecond influencing model, if we were to delay the top and bottom deck by more than 8 milliseconds on every hole and make sure that we're not getting, let's say we get a little bit 6, so we say 6, we're still at 13, so that's a bit better. So we've delayed them and we've got some overlap, and then, but mostly we don't have overlap. So we're at 13 milliseconds, so already we are coming closer to our target. So what else can we do to change that? Well, let's say it's not that wet, it's saturated, but we dewater the holes or something like that, or we can, let's say the water isn't salty, it's pretty good, it's fresh water, so it's only one density, so you don't need heavy. So let's say we can pump in there a 1 point. Now the little columns, now they're less compressed, so let's say, I don't know, so let's say 1.1. Let's say our average in hole is 1.13 or something. It's short bench, that's probably right. So straight away we dropped a millimeter off by reducing the density of our explosives. Wow, this is getting good. We've reduced the length of the charge by putting in the inert deck, so we've mitigated it by spreading out our charge. So we're still doing a lot of the same work. So let's say we are going to put in an air deck at the top of the blast hole, so we can increase the stemming a little. So we'll call that the second inert deck, and we'll put in, let's say we put in 0.5 of a meter, right? Put in 0.5 of a meter, and we've got now an air deck at the top of our stemming column. And we are looking at massive MIC reduction there. Wow. So now we're at 10.87, which is pretty close, getting pretty close. So what can we do there? Much more? There's not much more we can do at that point. So we might just say we're going to risk it. Is that something that's good? Maybe not. If we could get, so what could we do? We could increase our time. What else can we do on there? That's a good idea. Where we got here? What else can we do? Delay interval. Oh, we can increase that. We can reduce the confinement. Oh, so we could put in less stemming, more air. That might be a good idea. And we can fire it away. So we don't have many choices here, but one of the good thing would be to increase the time between holes. So if we could increase the charge delay per round, that might work. So we can do that. So let's say if we increase the number of holes or the delay period, so we increase the time. So let's say we're going to use, instead we were using 17s and 42s, let's go with 25s and 42s. That's a much larger delay between the two. So let's say that drops it down by 5 holes firing in a period. Well, we're down, we're good 9.4. But this is an ideal thing. If this changes just a touch, we're back to square one. But this is our limit. So this is how you map out something. Now, this is not a perfect science at this point, but MIC, the amount of explosives you let off in any given period of time, is your biggest driver to controlling blast vibration. So I think personally that is the best method of control, is to reduce your charge if you can. Hole size doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter. It's you can have a large hole. If you can get a large hole and put explosives in it and get the result from your current hole size, but reduce your charge by using air decking and multiple decks throughout the blast, then you will eventually control it. Good idea. So what do we got in the AS2187? What do they say about it? They say in 6.2 of Appendix J. So this is what they say about it. They say your control measures that may be effective in reducing the impact of ground vibration at a particular site may include one or more of the following. Reducing maximum instantaneous charge. So we've done that. We reduced the maximum instantaneous charge. Tick. We've done. Using a combination of appropriate delays. Yes, we did. We increased from 17 to 25 on our spacing delay. So that's good. Allowing for excessive humps or toe in the design. I'm not sure I quite understand what they're trying to say there. We'll ignore that one. Didn't apply to our application. We were in a production shot. It's just a standard production shot. Optimizing blast design, changing burden and spacing by altering drilling patterns. So yeah, you could, because what is that going to do? That's going to reduce the confinement between your your rows. So between inter-row relationships, that is going to reduce that, which means you're going to be liberating the rock, and then the next piece of rock doesn't have to move as much as what it would have done with the original burden and spacing. That's a good point. Exercising strict control over the location, spacing, and orientation of all blast controls, and using minimum practicable subdrill that gives satisfactory toe conditions. It's a good idea. And also establishing blasting times to suit the situation. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a scenario where you've got a nearby village and there is a period of time that they all go out, this, and they go to a neighboring village further away or something like that, or they go to a place that's further away, then the vibration they experience will not be as much, obviously, because they're further away from the blast. So that's a people control, but it's not a structure control. So the only other way we can do that is by getting the blast further away from the structures that are important, that we want to protect. Nearly at an hour. I hope this has been good, a good little bit of a chat. Few glitches in my calculator there. That's right, that one's wrong. Yeah, that's better. I think we had a good chat about that. So I'm pretty happy that was fairly explanatory. That those equations, they're available on the Blasting Apps site. The little application that I made here. Where is it? I'll just bring that up on the screen once I get it to the right size. Where are we? Okay, just have to change the settings. Okay, all right. So this little apps thing that I've done here, blastingapps.xyz, it's just HTTP. This one here, you can go here and you get a whole bunch of little calculators to help you think out things, a little bit of fly rock. Now, those calculations that I pointed out to in here, all this sheet you can build pretty quickly. You can ignore column P and R. That was just something from ages ago that I put in there. But yeah, if you can go to here, you can get this single blasting calculator, give you a little bit of what your MIC would be. Vibration, a little calculator. So this is exactly that. And you can find the calculations from that are right here. Now all you have to do is copy and paste this section out into a spreadsheet and then take out the titles. It's pretty easy. You're just going to say, I want to find out what my vibration is here. I'm going to copy that from the equals sign. Pretty easy. Copy it. I'll put it in this cell just for now. I'll paste it in this cell. It's going to have a little complaint because it's looking for these, and then I'm just going to select where the K value comes from, where the distance comes from, where the weight comes from, my square root, and my attenuation value, and click the tick, and now I get exactly what this number is. So this is how easy it is to make that calculation. I've done the work for you, and it's all on that website. So if you like that, that's cool. There's other calculations on there. I haven't updated everything that's in here, but there's other calculations in here, and there's also a overpressure one which you can use. But look, I'd be really cautious of overpressure because wind plays a big role in overpressure, and that one, wind, cloud cover, direction of fire, face, confinement, everything that works for vibration sometimes doesn't work very well from air overpressure. So a little bit of a playground there for you all. So by all means, go to this. It's free. Go and have a look. You can go and get some calculations and information out of it. Yeah, so pretty cool. I just thought I would show you the difference between linear or exponentially sort of showing graphs and log graphs, and what these sorts of things mean, and how your K value can adjust those lines. So we can dial up, get this K value here. We've got just a slightly 500 kilos different, but it rained. So it rained. Let's do that. That's a good idea. Let's get this to 1510. Yep. So 1500 kilos firing, and it rained. So generally we normally got a K value of 490, 500, and it rained, so it's at 1570. So this is the difference that we get just from a bit of rain. And rain, what does rain do? But it stops the it fills the voids up and helps the transmission. So it reduces attenuation. So it reduces the decay of the signal. At an hour. I hope you liked it. I hope you like this little video, and I mean, everyone does something on vibration every now and then, but this was my little bit on vibration. I hope that you like it. I haven't done a video for ages because I've been really busy, as I said, and I was feeling kind of guilty. A lot of people subscribed to me recently, so I had about 30 or 40 extra subscribers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was. I really appreciate it, those people that subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I did say I was going to do a video probably once a fortnight, so I'm going to continue. I can continue talking about this particular subject of vibration, or we can talk about timing, or we can talk about blast design, or whatever. So if you want a particular topic talked about, if you think that my advice is good advice, or it's good information and it helps you out, then please subscribe to the channel. Click the like. Definitely click the like, because the more you like these videos, the more people see them, and the bigger, obviously this is already a very tiny niche topic, blasting. Yeah, I mean, what do you watch on your weekend? What do you do on your weekend? Oh, I make blasting videos. So absolutely, please get people to subscribe. Help a guy out. I know there's a lot of trouble in the world at the moment, so you may not even be thinking about this. So thanks very much, and check out the standards there, and the links are in the description. So check all that stuff out, and I hope you have a great day. And thank you very much for watching or tuning in, and thank you very much for supporting.